Hi, everyone. So for everyone just joining us, we're just going to wait another minute or two and let more people join, and we'll get started shortly. So we have about 30 people online right now, so we'll get started, and I'm sure more will join us as we go. So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for today's update on the Cougar Creek debris retention structure. My name's Adam Robertson. I work in the communications department with the town and will be the moderator this afternoon. With us today are Andy Esarte, Manager of Engineering, and Felix Camire, Project Manager for Cougar Creek. Before we get started, we'd like to run a quick poll to get a sense of how the 2013 Cougar Creek flooding impacted you. You'll see that poll pop up on your screen if you just want to take a quick minute and answer that. And Kara, when you think we have most people that have answered, just pop the results up for us. So it looks like just over half the people on the call today lived in Canmore in 2013 and were affected by the flooding. About 35% did not live in Canmore during the floods, and 13% lived in Canmore in 2013 but were unaffected by the flooding. Thanks everyone for taking the time to do that. That's helpful information for us. So Andy and Felix will now provide an overview of the Steep Creek Mitigation Program and an update on Cougar Creek. The presentation will take approximately 30 minutes, and we'll use the rest of the time to answer any questions that you have. As we go through the presentation, you can type any questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many of them as possible once the presentation is finished. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andy. Take it away, Andy.
Thanks, Adam, and welcome everyone. I had Adam run that poll. I gave a presentation up at an annual AGM meeting at Stone Creek Properties for residents that were affected and properties that were affected during the 2013 flood. We had, I think, about 25 people in the room, and asked anyone who lived there in 2013 to put up their hands, and it was Guy Turcotte and 3 other people who were property owners at the time out of that group. So for that reason, we like to start these presentations with a bit of background and really getting back to the fundamentals and using it as an opportunity to inform residents in general about our program. So as part of the presentation, we'll talk about the overall community program quickly. We don't have a lot of time for that. And then Felix will get into a construction update for Cougar Creek, the debris flood retention structure specifically, talk about next steps in the work, and touch on some of the things that are topical, like trail closures and emergency preparedness. So what is a steep creek? We have a number of them in our community. They are creeks with a grade of 5% or more typically. They're found in mountainous regions throughout the world. So it's not something that's unique to our area by any means. The behavior of these creeks is characterized by long periods of nothing happening, low flows, oftentimes dry creek beds. And those periods are punctuated by extreme events. And this is events where we get heavy rainfall and we see large volumes of water, gravel, rocks, boulders, trees flowing down these creeks, and big changes in the terrain and topography. Where the event is mostly water with some sediment and woody debris as a percentage of the flow, it's termed a debris flood. And where there's a larger amount of water, it's termed a debris flow. So you may hear those terms used in our program, and that's referencing the two common types of geomorphological events that happen here. There are also landslides, which are on steeper grades yet, and those are mainly soil and less water. And then, of course, the flooding we have on the Bull River, which is almost entirely water, and that's happening on a very shallow grade. Where material is deposited, it's called an alluvial fan. Unfortunately for our community and many others, evidence of these extreme events is covered by vegetation and lost. And these lands tend to create otherwise very attractive areas for development. And so looking at our community on this slide, those areas have well-drained soils, they have good views and manageable grades. And so in yellow on this image is the Cougar Creek catchment, and in red is the alluvial fan that catchment has created in the river valley. At the time when we did the risk assessment after the 2013 floods, that red area was home to about 2,500 residents and 40% of Canmore's business activity, not to mention the highway, rail line, and a number of key facilities like the heliport, RCMP, and the school. So wherever we have these alluvial fans, we have debris flow and debris flood hazards present, and that is on around a dozen creeks in town. And where we've developed these fans, we have risk, and that's risk to property, infrastructure, and lives. Prior to 2013, little was known about these hazards and risks in our community. So 2013, one of those rare events struck us on June 19th. It was a 3-day rainfall event in which we received in excess of 250 millimeters precipitation, or 3 times the amount expected for the month of June on average. Rain quickly saturated all of our catchments. It initiated a series of devastating debris floods and debris flows. Those caused tens of millions of dollars in damages to houses, highways, utilities, rail lines, and municipal infrastructure. We had a lot of lives put at risk with our first responders and equipment operators, and they worked over 3 days to actually protect the community and prevent what could have been a worse outcome, and to get people out of harm's way and keep them safe. We had a significant amount of mitigation that had been put in place based on a 100-year hazard return period, and that was entirely ineffective and completely lost. And so shortly after the event, we initiated a Steep Creek mitigation program, and that included a number of elements. One, we wanted to have very good communication with the community, a lot of information sharing, and if you go on our website, you can now see that there is a significant amount of information available there. We also had to partner with a lot of key stakeholders. We have a number of significantly impacted parties like the rail line and the Trans-Canada. We studied each of the creeks to try to understand what had happened. This was all quite new for us. We had expected quite different behavior on these creeks based on previous studies. And we completed hazard assessments, which were in-depth looks focusing on the types of processes that these creeks can actually have, as opposed to a more typical clear water study, which had been done based on river studies, which is the historic practice in Canada. Based on those hazards, we looked at all the areas of development and assessed the risk. We constructed in that year following a significant amount of short-term mitigation and have since been constructing longer-term mitigation to reduce those risks. And we have a program where we have emergency preparedness and planning in place, and also have updated all of our municipal policy to ensure that the types of risks that were created in advance of the 2013 event will not be created for the community with development going forward. And this is a look at the hazard map for the community, and it's meant to be intuitive with the colors. The moderate to extreme hazards are in the darker shades. So you can see it affects quite a large portion of the community. So for Cougar Creek specifically, we're looking at some of the revetment that was put in place to prevent erosion in the year after the concrete mats, which are now partially buried and obscured by the landscaping. We also installed a debris net, which was intended to protect for mobilization of all the loose material in the channel after the flood was filled with downed trees and loose boulders. And had we gotten an event in the period after, it would have mobilized that and caused a lot of grief with the culverts. This is a look at the hazard assessment pre-2013, completed by the province. And this was focused on a 100-year hazard, a clear water hazard. And just to give a sense of what we're contending with is not only is the hazard significantly worse for a 100-year event, but we looked at the full range of possible events, including much larger events than 2013, which there is evidence of occurring multiple times in the last several thousand years. And so when we're considering hazards, it's really important for us to understand the full range of possibilities so that we can appropriately consider what is the actual risk to our community and how do we appropriately mitigate that. And so with that hazard, we look at the development. We consider 3 areas of risk to individuals. So if you're in your particular property, what is the risk? Group risk, which is the risk to the larger community, how many individuals could be affected in a single event, and economic risk, the direct financial cost of a flood. This is a graphic in our risk assessment shown really just to show that there is a significant potential for risk of loss of life in the Cougar Creek area. That risk is deemed unacceptable and is a big driver behind the mitigation efforts that we're taking. And this is the risk in a visual context. The red areas are all exceeding, they're a higher risk. Those are properties that wouldn't meet risk thresholds for existing development. We have a higher risk threshold yet. We want new development to be 10 times, built to a 10 times safer standard. It's hard to retrofit and reduce risk for existing development, but is something we want to prevent with new development. And that's shown in the yellow areas. Those wouldn't meet current new development risk thresholds. So based on all that information, all of which is on the website for people who are looking for more information on the reports, we looked at 3 options for mitigation. And the goal with that is to reduce the risk to those tolerable thresholds. And the 3 options we looked at were the pre-flood retention structure, the one that's being constructed. We also looked at a similar structure which functions to retain water and sediment, hold that back and discharge it at a rate that the culverts and channel below can handle. So we looked at that same type of structure, but a little further down. And then the 3rd option was looking at retaining debris only and allowing flow through. And ultimately, based on a number of criteria, the first option was selected, and that'll be the basis for Felix's update. So with the short time, that's obviously just a very high level look. There is a significant amount of information. All the mapping you've seen is available on our online property viewer. You can zoom in on your individual properties. We have published and made transparent every piece of information that we have on flood hazard and risk in the community. We think it's important that our community members fully understand so that they can prepare themselves individually and understand that with their property. And so it's all there, as is our overall Mountain Creek hazard mitigation program. And with that, I'll turn it over to Felix.
Thank you, Andy. So yeah, I'll take over here, and we'll be specifically talking about the progress on site. So I will start with this slide, which basically shows a rendering that was presented at the last open house before the project started. We have a video also on our webpage that shows the different angles viewing the final structure. So this view here is basically looking upstream. So as if you're going upstream, walking upstream towards the site right now. And I'll just show some of the main elements that I'll be discussing with the actual photos of construction here. So this whole area here is basically the emergency spillway. And I've got a few photos that will show this. The next area to discuss is basically the whole structure, the embankment dam itself. So this is basically what the main structure is going to be built on the side view. Is basically this triangular shape, and this is all rock fill material in here. And then the last one on this slide here is this little area here, which is the outlet structure. And the outlet structure is where the water will be flowing out of the creek once it's being diverted through the structure itself. And then just downstream of that outlet structure is a stone pitch channel. And I've got a photo on that too. And I just want to make sure that people understand where it is. Now, this is also another rendering, but this is an overview looking downstream this time from the air. And you'd have the same emergency spillway on the east side of the structure. On top of the structure itself, and you can see that too on the other slide, the previous slide, is basically the crest at the top here, but also the access road. So we have an access road that will be coming all the way to the upstream side of the structure. And this will be used for inspection of the structure when it's finished, and also for maintenance, debris removal, and etc. Now, on the upstream side, we do have the intake here, and this is basically where the water will be going through the structure. This is where it's going to enter the structure, basically. Now, looking at last slide before the actual photos, this is a plan view of structure. It's our drawing, and you can see the spillway on it, the outlet structure, and the intake. So the flow of water here is, this is the upstream side. It flows downstream this way. And the other things you can see here that I'm adding is the rock cut. I'll be talking about that. That's going to be one of the first few photos. And we had to basically blast the rock here to create a more vertical wall. And this is where, at the bottom of this wall, this is where the whole low-level outlet is being constructed. So the low-level outlet is the tunnel that's connecting the intake to the outlet structure. It consists of a large 3.1 meter steel conduit. There you go, first photo. So this is in order of kind of following timelines since the start of construction. So in August, that was the main thing that the contractor was doing outside of the mobilization efforts themselves. There was basically doing the rock cut up here. And this is a little bit of a representation of where, or the shape of the rock was before the rock cut was undertaken. So, you know, some areas it was fairly shallow grades, other ones it was steeper. And basically with the end result is we have a wall that's about between 70 and 80 degrees steep. And then the bottom area here where that excavator is sitting is basically the foundation of that low level outlet that I've shown before, and then you'll see more photos of that. Now, jumping to October of 2020, you can see here the outlet structure that was being constructed. So in terms of concrete that will be showing once the project is finished, the outlet structure will be a portion of it will be exposed, and that will be concrete. A portion of the intake will also be exposed. And that's about it in terms of concrete that will be shown. The rest will be rock, dirt, and basically grass growing. So on this photo here, you cannot see really the outlet, the hole at the end here. We'll see it in another photo, but you can see that main conduit sticking out at the end here. So that's the main conduit where the water will be flowing permanently through. We also have a bypass pipe here and another one on that side. And those pipes also go all the way to the upstream side of the structure and are being used when there's going to be maintenance done on the main conduit and we need to close it off to be able to inspect it. Or also if there's any issues with that main conduit, we can actually open up the valves on these bypass pipes to let water go through while we fix the issue on that main conduit. So also October 2020, this is a view looking actually downstream and foundation of the on the bedrock here for the low level outlet. And you can see here that large pipe kind of sticking out. Now into December of last year. So this is a photo looking upstream, and you can see here that large pipe being installed and different intervals. And you can see some hoarding here that I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. And they've been using mostly a very large crane to put in place those large pieces, including the bypass pipes and a lot of the formwork for concrete and all that. So that large crane has been on site since the beginning of the project pretty much. This is basically a photo taken from a drone. So we fly a drone up in the reach there over the construction site approximately every 2 weeks. And we use this to take photos of basically the construction and to have a good record of how the construction is moving along. But also it provides some safety when we're doing blasting. We can use that to ensure there's nobody close by outside of having field staff on the ground to block the trails and things like that. But and also we use the drone to do survey of rock walls, of piled materials and different things. So in this photo here, this is looking upstream. So this is the spillway area. So the trees were removed in September, October, or August, I can't remember now. But the trees were removed, and then this photo here, at this point, they had started doing some blasting and some exploratory work in this section. And then on this section here, the outlet is right about here, and the low-level outlet goes to here, and then the intake will be approximately there. Now, from the same day, also from the air, another photo of focusing on the rock cut and the low-level outlet itself. So this time we're actually looking downstream. So this is the outlet structure here, and you can see progress of the main conduit moving along, and also you can see the foundation of the intake right here. And all this section here is where the main rock cut happened. Even if this winter was fairly mild compared to some previous or other winters we've had, we did have requirements to actually do a lot of hoarding, which is basically placing tarps on top of a lot of construction area, and also especially when you're pouring concrete to ensure that you meet the specifications. And so doing construction work like this in winter is definitely a little bit more challenging. And again, even though if it was a nice winter, you still need to go through all those steps. During the week of February, that was really cold. Construction pretty much came to a stop for a few days, only the essential things were, essential work was happening. And of note too, we had a winter that was quite windy. There was a lot of very windy days that kind of wreak havoc a little bit with our tarps throughout the winter. So now going to March, after that cold deep freeze of February, we had early, basically a little bit of a surprise with early spring in March, where what that meant for us was on the rock cut, we started getting a lot of rockfall. I'm not talking about like large sections or large chunks, but smaller pieces of rocks that were putting people in danger or workers. So the contractor decided to install this very colorful but efficient mesh all the way along the rock cut. So if you've seen it from far away and you wonder what that is, this is what it's for. This mesh is temporary and will be removed as the construction continues. And at the end, like, you won't see any of that mesh up there. And just you can see somebody here doing the install. A lot of the install was actually done on ropes from the top down. This is a photo of the intake construction going on. And at this point here, up to approximately this level, the concrete was all poured, and then they were actually working on doing the installation of formwork of the upper levels. And this concrete work now is all finished. And they continue working on this, installing a few different things, including our debris rake and a few other things on the intake. Now, just as an example of what's required to do on site for such projects. So this is looking downstream, just slightly below the outlet structure. The access road from Elk Run Boulevard all the way to site is actually on the west side of the creek. And then for the contractor to access the spillway, which is just the base right here, and upstream, they need to install culvert crossing. So when they do this, they divert the creek around the site, install the double culvert, and then backfill, protect the inlet and outlet with some riprap, and then redivert the creek through the culverts. Now the downstream channel. So basically, this is just basically from Elk Run up to the start of construction site. A lot of people have noticed there's been a lot of maybe strange work happening there. Some people called, sent emails wondering what was going on. So just to make sense of it all, I decided to just throw this in and explain this a little bit. So basically, this is our access road at the bottom of the creek here. It starts from the Cougar Creek rink and goes up along. And to ensure that the road will not get eroded during small events like what we're having right now with snowmelt, the bank of that road was protected by large riprap. And the contractor took that riprap, placed it there. And then when we saw that, we were wondering if we have a large event, if we could actually have some issues at the toe of our concrete mats due to the width of the channel and being as wide. And therefore, the contractor took some of that larger rock and placed it along the west bank. And then in May this year, the contractor was about to do the stone pitching, the grouted riprap just downstream of the outlet structure. And they realized that they didn't have enough riprap available close by. And the best source was actually the riprap that was along the banks here. Therefore, they proceeded to remove the riprap that was along here because that was the best rock for the job, take it upstream, place it and I'll show that in the next slide here, and proceeded to take some smaller rock and replace what was removed from the banks here. And then the middle of the creek itself, because there was so much traffic back and forth on it, and it was quite compacted, felt it was better to decompact some of that material so that there would be more creek and water infiltration during any flows. So that's why there was quite a bit of work going on there, and it was quite confusing for most people to look at what was going on here. This should stay as it is until the end of construction. At the end of construction, the road will be removed. Therefore, this area here will be changed too. And then we'll be looking at exactly how we want to finish this whole section at that point. So this is a photo of that stone pitch channel, the grouted riprap I was talking about. So the water will be coming out of this main pipe on a permanent basis with the water diversion that will happen fairly soon here, probably in the next few days or early next week. And to ensure that there would be no erosion taking place anywhere close to the outlet structure or close to the embankment, we use that the very large rock and encasing concrete that basically is quite similar to what we've done at Highway 1 at the inlet and outlet of the culverts there for maybe 4 years ago now, 5 years ago. So very, very much the same principle here. And just downstream of that, there's a little bit of riprap, but yeah, that's what it looks like right now. Now, on our drone shot, this is my last photo here actually of the site. And basically it shows, again, downstream is on the left side, upstream is the right side. It shows the outlet and pretty much the whole low-level outlet, apart from this whole section here, completely encasing concrete, and then the inlet here, the intake. This concrete here will not be visible because it is buried under the whole structure, which will be basically coming up this way and kind of back down here from a side view. And right now you can see the creek diversion at the bottom end here. And this is where the creek is currently flowing. And again, in a few days here, it will actually be going through the inlet, through the conduit and out on this side. And that's where it will be flowing for the next several years after that. So this is the photos I wanted to show here. In terms of next step on the project. So again, the water diversion is the next step. As soon as the water diversion is complete, then the contractor can start doing a lot more work on the foundation works and the construction of the core and the seal wall. So I'll just flip back to this photo here for a sec. So basically at the middle here, this is the center of the structure. And this is where there's going to be a seal wall going all the way down. We have to tie to bedrock. And to be able to do that, we need to do a large excavation. So most of this area will be excavated. And that's why we need the water to be flowing through this to do that. And then the foundation will be placed on bedrock for this seal wall. Then the seal wall will start being built up and backfilling and basically up to the creek level. And then the next step is going to be really working the spillway and the embankment itself. So of note, the spillway rock, whenever we're doing blasting and rock excavation, that rock is being used to actually build the embankment structure. So we have a minimal requirement basically no requirement to actually import material in to actually construct the embankment. And that was one of the changes we made to the project about two and a half years ago. And it basically minimizes the amount of heavy truck coming through the site. And once the spillway and embankment works is complete, then we basically go to installing all the monitoring equipment, doing reclamation of the structure of the whole area, and then commissioning the structure before it's in full operation. In terms of expected completion, right now we're still expecting the project to be completed summer of 2022, and with work ongoing throughout the summer and the next several months here. There is actually, just before I go to that, one last little thing too. There is lots of uncertainty coming up here with the foundation works. So this is one of the key area coming up here. And if we see that there's changes to schedule or anything like that, we'll make an effort to keep keep you guys informed on what's going on there. Now, in terms of just the trail closures, just a quick one on this. Our current trail closures are basically the canyon itself is closed, and also the Lady Mac Trail. The Lady Mac Trail will stay closed until the spillway blasting is complete, which we're expecting to be late 2021. And then the Cougar Creek Canyon itself will stay closed until the project is completed. Access to both sides of the creeks are available right now to go to the Horseshoe and G8 on the east side, and then to go to Montane on the other side. And this is pretty much my last slide here. So in terms of emergency preparedness for the project, so because we're working right in the middle of the creek in May and June, and also throughout the year, you never know. So we have a specialized weather forecast from UBC that's just specific to Canmore, and it's being updated on a regular basis every 3 or 6 hours. And we use that to provide some really good information to the construction crew on site. We're also in communication with all of our environment parks, in direct communication with them regarding any major storms coming, and also related to Bow. We've created a specific construction emergency response plan just for during construction. And we've undertaken some contractor and consultant training for the project to be sure that we're all ready for emergency preparedness. And also internally at the town, we just conducted a tabletop exercise with a lot of the senior people at town in terms of emergency management specific on Cougar Creek. In terms of what you can do to be prepared, well, you can be knowledgeable and informed. There's a lot of information on our website and also on the provincial website in terms of potential hazards that you can face, and also knowing what to do in case of an emergency and an evacuation. And you can also be prepared by having your 72 hours emergency kit ready, and also have your emergency plan up to date. So yeah, this concludes our presentation, and I will now turn it over to Adam to take some questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Felix and Andy, for your presentation on the program and update on Cougar Creek. So we do have a number of questions coming in the Q&A box, which is great. So please keep those coming in. We also have a few questions that were submitted in advance, so we'll try to get to as many as we can. So we'll get started. The first question I'm going to direct to you, Felix. How high is the water expected to pond behind the retention structure?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll try to keep it short, but on a regular basis during regular operation, there shouldn't be any ponding at all. So it's designed so that the water goes right through. It's not being retained upstream of the structure. And it's only during a higher flow event that the water would be retained. And the intent is to retain it for as little time as possible and have most of it go through. The maximum height is approximately 4 meters below the top of the structure, which is about 30 meters above current creek bed.
Great, thanks. So we have two similar questions. What prevents debris from blocking the inlet structure?
Yeah, another good question. So the inlet structure, I didn't put a photo of this, but we just installed it actually. There's a large debris rake right in front that actually prevents from large pieces of logs, trees to actually block the intake. And the intake is really, really big. Lots of places where water can go through to get in. So that's one thing. And the second thing is the way this works is you basically, there's a maximum amount of water can flow through that low-level outlet. And whenever you reach a threshold, it starts forming a little bit of a lake upstream, just directly upstream of the intake. And whenever you form that lake, it's a little bit like a delta formation. Wherever the water slows down, which is on the upstream side where the creek goes into that lake, that's where most of the debris will get deposited. So the intake itself, typically on those kind of structures, actually stay clear for a long time. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so Andy is just showing you here there you go. That's the intake with the rake here, shown on the right side. So Yeah, so that's basically how this works. And this principle is being used in Austria quite a bit, and Switzerland, and Japan, and other places. So it's not necessarily something that's new. It's new for us here in Canmore, but not in the world.
Great, thanks, Felix. Our next question, I can take an initial shot at answering this, and Felix, maybe you can follow up. But the question is there a project schedule with major milestones on the town's website? So the answer is no, but we do update our Cougar Creek webpage on a bi-weekly basis with construction information, major things that we're working on that the community would want to be aware of. But Felix, did you want to mention any major milestones in the project?
Well, I mean, we do have some major milestones, obviously. So one of them is completing the low-level outlet that is just being finished right now, diverting the water, and then doing the foundation works and going back up to the creek level. And then after that, the next really big one is to bring that all the way up to the top. And in terms of dates, yeah, I'm not sure I want to say too much about that because it's a construction project. It changes differently, but yeah, I think that the main thing to keep in mind is just the end goal and where the project is going to finish.
Great, thanks. Our next question is, why is the electric installation still required a year after it was scheduled or installed?
Yeah, so the electrical, what we'll have on site is we'll have a lot of monitoring equipment. We'll have several cameras that will provide live data back to the town. So there is a need for electricity for that. Initially speaking, we're looking at just solar and battery. However, what we have decided to install as part of the project is a gate system that can be driven electrically. So the gate would be used to close off that main conduit when we need to do some inspections or any maintenance on it. And that's a system that's a lot easier to use to operate instead of having a manual gate or instead of installing logs to block the intake and things like that. So the electricity is not necessarily for construction, it's more for the long-term operational structure.
Great. And I'll direct this next question to either you, Felix, or Andy, or possibly both of you, but can you speak to the status and future of the building restrictions on properties in Cougar Creek?
Sure, I'll hop in. So right now there are restrictions in place based on the current hazard, and this question references when will it change based on the construction of the mitigation? So we anticipate sometime in the early part of next year, we'll be taking updates to land use bylaw, which will change the flood hazard mapping for Cougar Creek, and that in turn will allow for development of parcels that are currently sitting undeveloped and other restrictions related to the high hazard to be relaxed. So probably by the midpoint of next year, that with the completion of the structure, those will be relaxed.
Great, thanks, Andy. Our next question for you, Felix. What controls the backed up water on the upside of the retention structure from creating its own path through the retention structure instead of all the water diverting through the permanent culvert?
Yeah, so basically that's what I was talking about, the seal wall. So the seal wall is basically a very large sheet pile that's going all the way across the structure from one bank to the other bank in the canyon, and it goes from the bedrock all the way to the top of the structure, and that's basically an impermeable layer, so the water cannot go through that. And then in front of that too, there's going to be a very large layer of material that's pretty much also does the same. It prevents water from going through. Great.
And a follow-up to that is, what's in place to ensure the upstream water diverts to the culvert?
Yeah, so this is interesting. There's nothing very specific that I can answer in terms of we're not forcing the water to go through there. It's basically if the water has nowhere else to go, it goes through there. And since everything else is going to be sealed, including some grouting and grout curtain for those who are a little bit more technically inclined, will be established too. So it's basically, there's no other path to the water. It goes through that large culvert there. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Our next question is, when will Elk Run Bridge be completed?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe I'll flip this one to Andy. I don't know if you have a little bit more.
Sure, yeah. I mean, we've got a bit of work to do to finish up the pathways and clean up the north edge of Elk Run. We also have been holding off paving Elk Run while construction traffic's accessing up and down. So our intention is, as construction's winding down, we get in and finish the work that otherwise gets run over continuously while it's being worked on, while the project's being completed. So it's something we're looking at scheduling for the tail end of the mitigation work to get that finished.
Thanks, Andy. And our next question for you, Felix, is where is hiker access to Cougar Canyon?
Yeah, so officially there's no hiker access to the Cougar Creek Canyon at this point. The closure is an Alberta Park closure, and there's no official access to it. And yeah, I'm not sure if I should say much more than that, really. Yeah, I think I'll keep it as that. Yeah.
No, that's a fair answer. Thank you. And our next, well, there's a bit of a preamble comment to this, which I'll leave, but the question, and Susan, my apologies if I'm not entirely sure on the area you're referring to, but on a practical level, there's a fault of some kind on Elk Run just past Lady Mac that causes all the leaving traffic to bounce up and down and creates a lot of noise. We're wondering if we can fix that.
On Lady Mac.
We'll take a look at it with Streets and Roads guys.
Yep.
And then our next question is a follow-up on project schedule. So why is there no project schedule available? Project schedules can be updated regularly. That's something that we can talk about. We could look at having some sort of high-level schedule available. As Felix mentioned, with any construction project, they're always subject to change. So we wouldn't want to promise anything to the public and people to keep it changing. But if that's something that people are looking for, it's something we could endeavor to try to put on the website. And Felix, if you have any other thoughts on that, please feel free.
No, I think we can definitely look at it. I don't know if Andy has something else you want to say about this, but
yeah, I mean, well, we've been working towards having a significant portion of the project completed this fall. There are two big periods of uncertainty that we need to get through. One is flood season, and then the other is the steep foundation work. And until we get through that, we're hesitant to commit to a fixed schedule because I mean, those types of things can change things. So we're working towards getting through these next two pieces. It's really our focus at this time. Our contractor has a completion for the majority of the work for this fall, but we already know with the way work's progressed, that's going to go into the winter. So it's the nature of construction and working in a high hazard area. Is there, how much water is there in the deep foundation work this year relative to last year and previous years where we were doing monitoring? These are all unknowns that until we get in there could shift the schedule pretty significantly.
Thanks, guys. Our next question is, what is the budget for debris removal above the dam? Is this provincially supported, and how is it managed since flow rates vary considerably from year to year?
Yeah, there's a couple parts to this. One is that there is an ongoing maintenance of mitigation in Camore and management of flood impacts in Camore, and those are very lumpy as the commenter has identified. You know, it could go 10 years with no cost, and if you're not saving money during that time, you know, a big paycheck or a big bill comes. So council's approved a reserve for maintenance of mitigation, and there have been annual contributions to that reserve since I think something like 2015. And what we've done is we've taken the studies to estimate the average amount of material that will come down and to budget for removal of that average amount. There's a small area upstream of the intake structure where sediment can accumulate. And so we can go a number of years without having to do any maintenance. And then to more efficiently remove it, we can do it all at once using the access road. So the specific costs, I think it's something like 5,000 cubic meters annualized. So it's not inexpensive. It'll be something like 75,000, depending on how that material's moved to remove it. And I think we're contributing right now something like 150,000 to a maintenance reserve. Cougar Creek's obviously, I mean, it's the largest, most developed alluvial fan in Canada that we're aware of. It generates a lot of material, so obviously it's going to be a large ongoing maintenance piece for us.
Thanks, Andy. Our next question is, what is the flood level that needs to occur for the spillway to be activated? Is it 1,000-year flood level?
The structure is designed to not overtop the spillway in an event equal to the size of 2013. So if we started seeing something much worse than that, then we could expect the spillway to be activated.
So in 2013, would the spillway have been activated?
No. No, and there are much larger events. The event type is a landslide dam outbreak flood, and so there's evidence of damming of the upstream channel. If you hike up there, you can see these mounds of material that have washed out. Those, the debris will slide during a storm. It'll impound water behind it. We saw one recently in BC, and then that will release rapidly. And so the structure is also designed to fully manage that without overtopping. So it can absorb the full flow of a landslide dam outbreak flood. If we were to get something, say a really long-term, really high volume, so more than 250 mils over 3 days rainfall, then at some point the structure fills. And that's where we see overtopping. It's really high volume, long-term rainfall events. And that's what the spillway is designed for.
Thanks, Andy. Next question is, how will hikers access the canyon after construction finishes? Will it be via the access road over the top?
Yeah, that's correct. So the intent right now, and that's going to be confirmed with all of our parks, the end of construction, but the intent right now is that hikers will be using the access road on the top and then on the backside. And then there will most likely have a connection from that access road to the Lady Mac Trail, because of the lower portion of Lady Mac Trail basically merges with our access road.
Thanks, Felix. And our next question is for you, Andy, and it's about other creeks. So what happens with mitigation on Three Sisters Creek now that the ASB has been defeated? And Andy, you're muted.
We have provincial and federal funding to mitigate for the existing development. We worked with the TSMV group during their application to look at a combined mitigation strategy. They're required to build certain portions of mitigation if there's development on their side of the creek. But that doesn't preclude us from being able to move forward with the mitigation that's planned to protect existing development. So we'll have to, the timing for that I think was 2 or 3 years out in our plan to build that. So as part of budget, we'll consider going it alone and getting that work done on that schedule.
Great, thanks, Andy. And question for you, Felix. What road will be used for future debris removal?
Yeah, so currently the plan is to use the access road from on the, it's not an access road, but the access from the benchland side that the contractor actually used at the beginning of the construction project before they put in their temporary access road at the bottom.
Thanks, Felix. And we do have a couple questions that were submitted in advance. I'm going to go to a couple of those. We just have a few minutes left, so if there's any more questions, please continue to type them in. We do have a couple of comments in there, so we'll make sure that we're reading those as well. Felix, what was done to control the noise from the blasting?
Yeah, that's a good one too. Even myself, I was surprised all the little noise there was during blasting. So yeah, the noise was controlled mostly with the size of explosives being used, and the fact too that the explosives are actually in the rock, surrounded by bedrock, and then they use blasting mat to protect from noise, but also from flying rocks in some of the cases. And it's really the fact that yeah, the size of the explosives and the fact that it's actually underground and not on the surface, like when we have avalanche control, for example, on EOR, which is very, very loud. Yeah.
Thanks. And our next one for you, Felix. How will the pile of broken tree parts be disposed of?
Yeah, so we're so as part of the tree clearing, we kept a lot of the branches and some root parts and a few of the smaller pieces of woody debris there. And this will all be used for reclamation. So some of the roots will be used to create reclamation patches where critters can go and hide and create nests along the creek bed. And then a lot of the branches have been mulch, and the mulch will be used for restoration yeah, and in a lot of different areas along on the project site.
We probably have time for two more questions, and likely these are for you, Felix. Who is Ridge Environmental Planning, and what do they do?
So yeah, Ridge Environmental Planning, they're our environmental consultant on the project. They actually work directly for the town of Canmore, and they are there to ensure that we meet all our regulatory requirements on the project to ensure that we use the best practices while constructing, to monitor the water quality of the creek during construction and all different things like that. So they're really there to help out the contractor and the town to be as environmentally friendly as we can, basically.
Thanks. And on a similar note, Felix, is there a geologist associated with this project?
We don't have a geologist right now directly associated with the project. So we did have some geologists involved in the early phases of the work when we did our environmental impact assessment, for example, looking out at different rock formation and all that. Right now, we do have some geotechnical engineers involved on the project because of all the drilling, the rock excavation, and also mapping of the rock as we go along.
And then just probably our last question for today. When will the lower part of the creek below the culvert be completed, the cementing of the boulders at the culvert?
Yeah, so that's a little bit like, that's part of what Andy was talking about. That whole area, we'll be looking at it when we get close to the project completion. And it's part of the finishing touch we want to put to the area around Elk Run.
Great, thanks. So that's all the time we have for questions today. So I want to thank Felix and Andy for taking the time to share an update on Cougar Creek. And we want to thank everybody for taking the time to join us today. And a couple ways to stay up to date on the project. So we do have a webpage. It's camera.ca/Cougar Creek. You can sign up for our mailing list there. As we said before, we do bi-weekly updates on that webpage. And if you have questions that didn't get answered, comments, you want to talk to someone about the project, there's an email address, cougarcreek@camera.ca, and Felix does his best to respond to questions on there. So again, we want to thank everyone for joining us today, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks all.